and Esther have been on hold. God bless you both. We're grabbing Joyce from Stillwater. Hey, Joyce, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for holding. What's your question today?
Well, I've been reading a lot about when we die, and a lot of places say that we go to heaven. And then I read yesterday that the Gospel of John, well, I was reading actually Hebrews about David, that David did not ascend into the heavens. And the Gospel of John, written, well, over 1,000 years ago after David's death, stated that no one has ascended to heaven but he who came down from heaven, that is the Son of Man, Jesus Christ. So this means that Abraham, Moses, David, all the righteous men and women who lived before Christ's first coming did not go to heaven. They were all buried in the grave as we will be. How does he explain that?
Well, those are very good observations that you make. However, I think that Jesus is making a unique point, and that is that none of us have ascended into heaven. We have been taken up to heaven, but we've not ascended. Only Jesus has physically ascended, into heaven. No one else is like that because he's the God-man who resurrects from the dead, following which he does directly ascend into heaven. And really, this is a verse to be taken in conjunction with Philippians 2, verses 5 to 11, as well as John 1:1, verse 14, and verse 18. These are verses that talk about the coming of the Son of Man for the purpose of revealing God to man. And in that sense, Jesus did come from heaven, and he became a man, and he spent, over 30 years on this planet, and then he resurrected and ascended back into heaven. But none of us ascend into heaven. Rather, what Scripture indicates is that at the moment of death, our spirit slips out of the body, just like a glove, or just like a hand slips out of a glove, and goes directly to be with the Lord in heaven. And this is the clear teaching of numerous passages. I'm thinking about Philippians 1, verses 21 to 23, for example, which talks about Paul wishing to depart this life and to be with Christ. He knew that the moment that he would die, his spirit would be with the Lord in heaven. Likewise, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 8, the Apostle Paul says that to be apart from the body is to be at home with the Lord in heaven. And not only that, we read about the martyrs in Revelation chapter 6. These are martyrs who died physically, but their spirits or their souls are up in heaven talking to God, asking God, how long, God, will you wait until you avenge our death on earth? And so, however you interpret Jesus' words, you can't do it to the exclusion of these very clear verses, which indicate that at the moment of death we go to be with heaven. Let me remind you also of what Jesus was saying to the Jewish leaders. And Jesus said to the Jewish leaders that God is a God of the living, and that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the other patriarchs were in heaven because God is the God of the living. Not the God of the dead, but the God of the living. And likewise, all throughout the Old Testament, you're going to see the phrase, Abraham departed and was gathered to his people. Isaac departed and was gathered to his people. Same thing with all the other patriarchs. And what that phrase means, gathered to his people, means that they're gathered to God's people who are already in heaven with the Lord. It's not gathering in the graveyard. It's a gathering with his living people, with the living God up in heaven. And so I grant you that that's a difficult verse, but I think it's a unique verse which talks about Jesus coming into the world through the incarnation, and in that sense he descended from heaven, and then he ascends back into heaven following his death and resurrection. You and I, by contrast, the moment that we die, our spirit simply departs the body and is escorted into heaven by two angels, according to Luke 16. So I know that's an awful lot of verses I gave to you, but consider all those verses together and meditate on those verses, and I think that you'll have a more cohesive viewpoint of what happens after death for believers.
Joyce, thank you so much for that. I pulled the book by Nancy Ortberg, Seeing in the Dark, Finding God's Light in the Most Unexpected Places. Esther, you have been holding, God bless your sweet little heart, for quite a while, but we have to take a break now, so we're going to catch you on the other side. If for any reason, Esther, you need to hang up. I have a sense of your question on the board, but as always, I'd rather talk with you and let you talk with Ron. If you're able, maybe make a sandwich, but you got to be back in 90 seconds because that's how long this break is. Talking to Dr. Ron Rhodes, more with him when we return.